we could agree, fundamentally, debt is bad. There are some debts that are useful and are good debts. But we'll talk about that in the journey as well. The time isn't here to deal with that. The question is for us as Christians, which way for the Christian? That's the important question, okay? And the Bible gives us some very interesting direction in relationship to this matter. The Bible says, do not love the world or the things of the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. Jesus wants us to be the light of the world and salt that gives flavor. Too often, in the management of money, the world salts us more than we salt it. This is an important piece for us to stop. Many Christians are deep in debt, like people who don't know Christ. And there's fundamental reasons. And this is where we want to slow down and talk about this. There's three fundamental reasons why somehow the church is in no better a place than the world. And yet we're supposed to be leading out. We're supposed to be the light. We're supposed to be the ones that show the way. But it doesn't seem to be happening. So there's three reasons. Number one, it's ignorance. Sheer ignorance. Many people, including college graduates who have gone and studied a degree, are financially illiterate. They were never exposed to the biblical or even secular principles of money management. So one of the key issues is a sheer ignorance. If you have not been exposed to the opportunities, whether secular or biblical, it leaves you illiterate, and therefore the decisions that one makes about money management can come more from your upbringing rather than the truth about money management. Does that make sense? So one of the key issues here is that it is indispensable that you get to grips, especially with the biblical principles of money management. I was shocked when I did the study to see how much the Bible talks about money. It's huge. You think it's just about Mary and Jesus and the disciples. Let me tell you, the amount of parables that Jesus spoke about, I think 3/4 of them had to do with money. We probably don't know that, but we're going to realize that money is a big deal even for Jesus. Does that make sense? Now, also we realize that another reason for the problem is greed and selfishness. In response to advertising, personal wants, people then go and live beyond their means. They're not willing to live in, drive, or wear what they can really afford. So many of these same people feel they're too poor then to tithe. And consequently, they live their life without God's promised wisdom and blessing. And I can see how that can easily happen in a place like Bangkok. Does that make sense? Where there's so much the latest styles, the latest fashions, and so forth. And I want us to understand, there's nothing wrong with providing wants. But the problem lies is that if it's going to get you into debt, if you can't be faithful to God, then something is fundamentally wrong. That's why the Bible says in 1 Timothy 6:6-8, godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. Does that make sense? Now, but for those who desire to be rich, they fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. See, there's a difference with God blessing you with wealth versus pursuing riches as if it's the only thing that matters. And we're going to understand how it becomes important to balance that. So the other third reason, so this, what was my first two reasons, by the way? So the first reason was what? Ignorance. What's the second one? Greed and selfishness. And the third one is unfortunate tragedy. Experience a serious illness without having health insurance. Being abandoned by a spendthrift marriage partner. Going through a natural disaster. Being born and raised in abject poverty. So there's the third element. Does that make sense? The unfortunate tragedies of life also play out in that regard. So I want to share with you 7 biblical principles which are practical guidance to peace and freedom in your financial world. Do you want to know what they are? Now, before I share this, I want to share something. When I talk about seeing the power of God, when I share these principles with you. Remember I said I left England and I got to South Africa with how much money? £60. How many wives did I have?
Only one.
One. How many children did I have?
2.
How many suitcases did I have?
6.
6. Okay? Did I have anywhere to live?
No.
No. We started out on a journey of life. Now I want to share with you the power of God's blessing. When we were leaving England, we had beautiful furniture in our house. The plan was to sell everything we owned so we could raise the cash to come to Africa. And you know what God said instead? Don't sell anything, give it away. Now let's put things in perspective. I'm looking in my house and I've got these beautiful leather sofas that my wife and I starved ourselves for 1 month. We didn't understand faith and finance those days, but we starved ourselves to get. There were beautiful things in the home, and the Lord was saying, give it away. Now, let's be honest. How easy is it to give away the things you've worked hard for? Is it easy? No. But the Lord is saying, give it away. And my wife saw a family. In their home, they didn't have any sofas. So my wife says, let's go to their home. And then we shared with them that we're going to give them our sofas. And I'm not going to lie to you, I was somewhat reluctant to give it away. To see these beautiful leather sofas in their home. But you know, we gave it away. We gave this away, we gave that away. People came to our house, they took my computer, fridge, washing machine. That's why we went to South Africa with £60, because I gave everything away. We got to Africa, testimonies, got to Africa, and I start to preach, and I'm preaching in this church. And we've got a little place that we're renting. Well, it's a little place. The Lord has blessed us with a place that we can rent, which was held by another church, the Church of England. And there was a beautiful house, but we couldn't afford to do anything. We had 2 beds with it was just a mattress, 4 knives, 4 forks, 4 spoons, and no fridge, just a cooker. And we had to exist just like that. Rochelle and Jordan were 3 and 4 years of age. No curtains on the windows because we couldn't afford curtains. Have mercy. Anyway, I'm preaching at this church, and this old lady who's not an Adventist comes to me, and she says to me, young man, I see that you're new to this country. Do you have any furniture in your home? Now, me being a very proud man, I don't like to tell people my problems. I said, no, we're fine. That time we have nothing to sit on. Nothing. But I said, I'm fine. She says, young man, listen, she looks like Jezebel on the way to hell. No, seriously. She's draped in jewelry. She's not, she is like on the way to hell. Trust me. So she's saying to me, do you have any furniture? I said, no, I'm fine. She said, young man, I'm asking you, do you have any furniture? I said, well, we've just arrived. We're just, She said, well, I've got an old sofa for you. Would you want it? And me being proud, I thought, well, what? I don't want a sofa, an old sofa, But, I said, no problem, she's an old lady. So I said, no problem. She said, well, when you go back to your home tomorrow, just wait and I will have somebody send you the sofa that we have. And so I said, oh, thank you very much, And then I went to my house, and the next day I waited. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock, nothing. 11 o'clock, nothing. 12 o'clock, nothing. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I've got to go back because there's the crusade to do. I've got to do Bible studies. And suddenly this massive truck comes up the drive. I'm talking not a little van, a truck. And I'm thinking, this is a big truck for a little sofa. And then 4 men got out of the truck and said, Mr. Nembhard. And I said, yes. They said, we're here to drop off. And I thought, okay. And I thought maybe they're dropping off at different places. And I just had the sofa. They took out brand new leather sofas. They took out cooker, sound stereo system, office equipment, 4 posturpedic beds. They took out, they just kept, I said, stop. What are you doing? They said, the lady told us to deliver these things to your house. I said, but she said a sofa and an old one. These are brand new. I said, stop. So I phoned the lady and I said, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're doing, but we are missionaries. We don't have any money. And furthermore, I can't pay you for all of these things that you're giving to me. She said, hold on, young man, hold on. She said, the reason I'm sending you this is because I'm a doctor and my husband is a doctor. And we have several properties that we own. And we bought a property for our children. And we moved them in and bought all of this new furniture. Unfortunately, they misbehaved. And so we took the property away, sold the property, and put the furniture in storage. And I was looking at you, young man. I was 29 at the time. I was looking at you, and I said, this boy looks like he's in need. I didn't know that, but anyway. And she said, and so she spoke to her husband and said, well, take all of the furniture out of the storage, put it in the truck, send it to their house. And I said, just see what fits. You can have anything that fits. Brothers and sisters, when I said, you mean see what fits? And she said, yes. And I don't have to pay. She said, no, you're a missionary. I said, brothers, take out everything out of it. Put everything there, put everything there. Everything in that house fits. I had brand new pictures and sofas and beds and office furniture and a fridge and a cooker and a NAD stereo. That is state-of-the-art sound system. But I look back and I thought to myself, how did this happen? Why? Because God said, give away what you have. And what did God do? Provided all of our needs. There's a journey in what I'm trying to share with you. The reason why some of us struggle, the way we struggle, is because we're not applying the principles of God. So let me share with you some of the principles. Number 1, we've got to get this right. Who owns everything? God. I mean everything. There is nothing that you or I own. Nothing. The faster you understand that, the easier your life will become. There is nothing you own. There's nothing you can say is mine. You are simply a steward of whatever you have. Period. The faster you understand that, as I said, the easier life will become. Because then when God requires of you, you then can't argue and say, but this is mine. Does that make sense? Once you understand that, and that's why as Christians, we understand that we brought nothing into this world and we are taking nothing out. While we live on this earth, we're simply a manager of what God has entrusted us. Does that make sense? Perfect, isn't it? That's not difficult to understand. So number one, what's number one? God is the owner of what? Everything. So remember, we're looking at practical guidance to peace and freedom in your financial world. Once you understand that God owns everything, guess what? It means that He is the provider of all things. The fact that you go to work is because God gives you strength to go to work. The fact that you get paid is not because you worked. It's because God has given you the blessing that comes with labor. Does that make sense? The more you understand that, the better. Number two, God and His wisdom and His counsel must have second place in your life. Is that what it says? God and His wisdom and counsel must have second place in your life. Is that what it says?
First place.
No, what does it say? First. God's counsel, God's wisdom must have first place in your life. You know, during my time as a missionary, I was confident that whilst I came to the country with 60 pounds, one wife, 2 children, and 6 suitcases, I saw God as accountable and responsible so long as I followed His counsel. Does that make sense? The final outcome was in His hands, not mine. That's why God sees our lives from beginning to end. He sees your life. He knows what's best for you, and He desires that you prosper. This means more than the simplistic question, what would Jesus do? We ask instead, what is His counsel in this area of my life? The reason why we're in financial difficulties oftentimes when we overspend is because we are not listening to His counsel, His wisdom. Does that make sense? So it suggests that if you're going to have peace, you need to become familiar with what His counsel is and what His wisdom is on matters of money management. Does that make sense? How many of you have studied money management from the Bible? Okay, we have one hand. How many of you have not studied money management from the Bible? Okay, so it would suggest something, wouldn't it? It would suggest that this church needs to embrace the journey of understanding God's money management principles. He desires for us to be poor or for us to prosper. Which one? Prosper. Now, do you know why He desires you to prosper? Any idea? Bless us. There's only 3 reasons for money. Did you know that? There's only 3 reasons on this planet for money. Bless God, take care of self, take care of others. That's the only reasons for money. What did I say? Bless God, take care of yourself, take care of others. That's the only reason for money. You got to ask yourself the question then. How are you using the resources that God has given you? Is it blessing God, blessing self, blessing others? Because that's fundamentally what the 3 core reasons. June will take you through that stuff. I promise you. So, your third purpose, is to what?
Glorify God.
Glorify God. The unbeliever seeks prosperity in order to spend and accumulate. The Christian seeks to prosper in order to provide for personal needs, the needs of others, and to help advance God's cause. Can you see the difference between the two? The Christian is God's ambassador. Now, please understand, in no way does that suggest that the Christian is not to have money. Let me give you an example. Paul was speaking to a Jewish guy. Listen to this one. This will blow your mind. His name is Brian Joffe. He's probably about how old now? He's about 65. About 65. And he's Jewish. Let me tell you, it's amazing. So when he finishes, he's going into retirement, he decides to set up a company by the name of Bidvest. Okay? Now, his deal was this, and it's a strange one. He would, whatever returns he made, he would give 90% to God and live off 10%. I'm not suggesting you do that. You probably go, what are you talking about, Errol? But listen to what this man did. So he lives off 10% and takes care of God, takes care of others, and lives off 10%. Years later, his business is a multi-billion rand business where he still lives off 10%. But what do you think his 10% is like that he lives off? Do you think it's grown? It is huge. Does that make sense? Because what he was doing, so let's say you're talking about he's giving his tithe, his offering, his person's help, and then he lives off 10%. God has blessed him that his business has expanded so much, and it is now $1 billion business. And he was 65 when he started. 65. I'm just sharing this with you, just for you to understand a few principles, okay? So, he decided not to accumulate, but to prosper in order to provide for personal needs, the needs of others, and help advance God's. Did you write this down? This is important, guys. That's the purpose of money. You might have some questions you want to ask. You can put them down in just a minute because I'm coming to the close. So what is prosperity? Prosperity is having what you need when you need it. Now, I want you to notice, having what you need when you need it. Not having what you want when you want it. Having what you need. Now, this is important. God never promised that by becoming a Christian, we'd become wealthy by the world's standards. But he did promise that if we serve him, he will provide for our needs. Be with us wherever we go and give us peace in our hearts. Let me give you an example. When we were in 2009, when Rochelle and Jordan were to come to Time for Study, my wife and I were not sure how we were going to finance all of this. But we knew one thing was sure. We take care of God's business, God will take care of our business. Amen? I can safely say that there's been no loans for Rochelle and Jordan. It's been a cash job. And obviously, you must know, having children abroad is not just about school fees. It's about apartments. It's about this. It's about that. It's about this. It's about that. But never 1 month has passed where God has not seen it fit to provide all of our needs according to what? His riches. Now, how much riches has God got? He's got everything. So, he has no problem supplying the need. Does that make sense? So your need does not have to be small. It may be a big need, and if God sees it as a legitimate need, he will supply it. Does that make sense? The question you've got to ask is, then what is God requiring of you so that He can supply your needs? And the problem that many people are experiencing is that because they're not supplying God's needs, but they're expecting God to supply their needs, it's like God's putting money in your hands and then you hold it like this. So He can't put any more money in because you've got to open it to allow it to flow so He can put more in. Does that make sense? But some people have got their hands closed the moment the money comes in, therefore nothing more can come. Let's carry on. So what's number one?
God is the owner of everything.
God owns everything. Number two?
God in His wisdom concern Himself first place.
God, number three?
Your purpose in life glorify.
Sorry? Glorify God. Number four? I want to find if I got some students in the house. Okay? Alright. This is good. Number five. Check this. Number five. Debt is bad. Okay, debt is bad. Recognizing and following this single principle would do more than anything else to bring peace to our family and prosperity to God's cause. Debt causes strife in families and stress in individual lives. You know, it is one thing to go to bed and have little and owe no one nothing. Does that make sense? Than to go to bed and be in debt. You can't sleep. You can't answer your phone. Come on, somebody know what I'm talking about. You look at that phone and somebody rings and you want, should I answer that? Should I not answer that? And if it's church-related debts, that is, you owe a brother or a sister in the church, you don't know if you can come to church that particular Sabbath. Does that make sense? So understand this. Part of this journey that you're going to be going through is first and foremost how to get out of debt and how to allow God to bless you in such a way that not only do you bless God, but by blessing God, God in turn takes care of your problem. Now, sixth, the tithe is the minimum testimony of our Christian commitment. Folks, listen carefully. Nowhere in the Bible does God suggest that less than a tenth of it is His. Failure to recognize and practice this principle, what did I say? Cuts us off from God's wisdom and His blessing. Now, you think it's just the tithe. Jude's going to share with you that the Bible says we must not come before the Lord empty-handed. Now, let me give you a little insight. You know when you come to the end of a month or when you get salary? How often do you do this? And you'll study with Jude, and you'll see what happened is that the children of Israel, they set aside their tithe, and then they ask the question, how shall we bless God for all of His goodness? The tithe is mandatory, minimum 10th, and then God asks you to bless Him with offering. Many people return tithe, but return no offering. Now think about this. What God is saying is, the 10th reminds you that I am the owner of all things. But offering is your choice to determine how you want to recognize how you have been blessed that allows you to return that which is mine. Now think about this. The church at a local level cannot do the things it needs to do unless there is offering. Does that make sense? Well, you're looking at me very, very quietly now. Am I stepping on somebody's toe here? I'll check. The offering is what determines
whether you can run programs. The offering pays the bills. It determines the different departments and the budgets they have and the ability to have speakers, programs, materials, and so forth. Without offering, the church can't function. Does that make sense? So in our church, and I'm going to give you our church, family life is given a budget. You know what we do with our budgets? By the time the year has come to an end, we have tripled the money that was given to us by the church. Did you hear what I'm saying? If we're given 50,000, by the time the end of the year comes, we can say like the servant, when the Lord comes, we have taken what you've given to us, tripled it, which means we give the church back what they gave to us, and now what is kept in the department going forward into the next year is 100,000. Family life is the highest revenue generating department in Santon Church in South Africa. Why? Because we realized to fly speakers from the United States, to do the DVDs, to produce the books, to do all of those things so that our people can be educated and they can have the things that are needed, demands resources. And you can't ask resources to appear from nothing. And we realize, therefore, that to do that, we ourselves, as family life leaders, invest in it ourselves because it's God's business anyway. Does that make sense? And people, when we do our functions, the offerings go back into family life if we do a family life week of prayer, which means our income as a family life department grows, so much so that we can now do the type of things that allows people to be blessed. Offering is a very important piece of the journey. So, finally, here's the big deal. Everyone must give an account to God of his money management. When settling accounts with the faithful, God says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You are faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of the Lord." So, have I shared enough with you? Has it stimulated you sufficient to say, maybe I need to take this journey as a member of Trinity Seventh-day Adventist Church? Maybe I need to take this journey with June and his wife and begin to understand money management from God's perspective. I hope that what I've shared with you, it's not about trying to give you the answers. That was not my purpose of my presentation. But rather, help you to begin to realize that God has a serious plan for your financial future. You can go the world's way, or you can go God's way. But my wife and I can safely say that God's way has produced far more than whatever the world could offer. You want to say something? Sure? Something like that? So let me do this last piece. Let me do this last piece, and then it's going to be question and answers. So let me show you the real piece that really blows my mind even to this day. I had given God 4 years of my life as a missionary. No salary. No salary. I know that sounds crazy, right? But do you know, those 4 years, we lived on Millionaire's Mile in South Africa. God blessed us more in those 4 years than I can ever remember. Because at the end of the day, his tax rate is 10%. When you think about it. And he blesses you far more. And after the 4 years, my greatest concern was, Lord, I've got to go back to the corporate world. So what am I going to do? This is my final testimony, then you can ask questions. What am I going to do? And I honestly did not know what I wanted to do. One thing I was clear of, though,
is that I didn't want to go back into the corporate world doing a 9 to 5. Number 2, I wanted some level of freedom to be able to work and do God's work. Number 3, I didn't want a 9 to 5 type of employment. Number 4, I wanted to find ways of meeting my family's needs. So, I was preaching away, and my wife was listening on the radio whilst blow drying her hair. Only women can do this, by the way. Blow dry their hair and listen to the radio at the same time. How that's possible as a man, I don't know.
I don't know. I can do it.
On the radio, she heard an interview between the managing director of an organization known as the Pacific Institute with the radio presenter. The radio presenter was interviewing him, and my wife heard something on that radio. She quickly took down some details, and I remember that night coming home from my preaching assignment, and my wife hands me this note and this number and says, "Errol, I found the job for you." I said, "What?" She said, "Phone this company." And I said, "Phone which company?" She said, "The Pacific Institute." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Well, the managing director was being interviewed on the radio, and he said all true and meaningful and lasting change starts first on the inside and works its way out. And it's exactly what you've been saying. So why don't you phone him?" I said, "Well, did he mention my name on the radio? I mean, did they call me? Did they say they wanted to see Errol Nembhard?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, why would I call them? I sound stupid." She said, "No, just call them." And so, I was struggling with the idea, but in the car, I then, when we were driving the next day, I plucked up the courage and I phoned and I said, "Well, my name is Errol Nembhard," and said, "Fine," and so forth. And she says, "Well, what do you want?" And I didn't know what to say, and she said, "Well, my wife heard about you on the radio, the company, and I was just wondering if there's any synergies." Now, I'm trying to use big words now. I don't know what I'm talking about, but she said, "Oh, well, we're not looking for your type." How do you know what my type is? I mean, I'm on the phone. And the problem was my accent. See, they were looking for people of color, but my accent didn't reflect that I was a person of color in South African's vernacular language. I says, "Well, I'm black." She said, "You're black?" I said, "Yes, I'm black." She said, "Well, would you come in?" I said, "Well, no problem. I don't know what I'm coming into. I don't know why I'm going there. But I put on my suit, got my CV, and I'm worried. You know why I'm worried? Because there's a 4-year gap on my CV. What I've been doing for 4 years? I've been an evangelist. How's that going to look in a corporate setting? Does that make sense? Evangelist. So I get to the place, and beautiful building, beautiful offices. I get there, a lady comes out, she sits with me, she starts talking about the cognitive sciences, systems theory, leadership development, Fortune 500. I have no idea what she's talking about. It's just going over my head, And she then turns around and says, "And have you done any of these things before?" And I said, "No, I've never done any of these things before." And she says, "Well, actually, I'm not sure if this would be useful for you anyway." And she said, "Why?" She said, "Well, we're looking for Christians." I said, "Christians? I'm a Christian. So I'm a Christian." She said, "Oh, that's wonderful." She said, "Well, have you worked with people?" I said, "Well, yes. For the last 4 years I've been working with people." She said, "Oh." And she said, well, we'd like you to meet with the managing director." So I'm thinking to myself, the managing director,
My gosh, I got home that evening. Paul said, so how was the interview? I said, it was interesting. She said, what do they do? I said, I don't know. She said, well, what do they want from you? I said, I don't know, but the managing director wants to meet me tomorrow. So I get my suit on again, I go, and now I meet the managing director, Farang. Farang, you guys call him on this side? Farang. Yeah, Farang. But I notice he's different. He walks in, I'm expecting him in a suit, but he drives a Harley Davidson. You know Harley Davidson, the bikes, the big bikes that they drive in the US? He comes in a Harley Davidson, big guy, sits down with me, looks at me, and his first question he asked me was, have you had a wilderness experience? I'm saying, sorry? What kind of interview question is that? Have you had a wilderness experience? I said, what are you talking about? He said, have you had a wilderness experience? I said, well, if you mean being a missionary for the last 4 years, well, you could call that, yeah, John the Baptist in the wilderness. That's what it felt like to me. Yeah. And we began to talk and talk and talk. And he looks at me and he says, listen, I want you to go on the process. This was 15 years ago. I want you to go on the process and tell me what you think about it. So I went on their leadership development program. He paid for it. And he came back and he said, what do you think? I said, wow, it's amazing. It's brilliant. He said, I don't know, but here's what I'm going to suggest. I want to offer you 2 options. Now remember, I'm a missionary. So guess what? I'm broke, but I'm blessed in Jesus. Amen? He says, I'm going to offer you either 30,000 rand per month, which in today would be 90,000 baht, or 25% of any business you bring in. Choose which one. Now, because I had been so dependent on the Lord for the last 4 years for everything, I couldn't accept the salary. I said, if God is in this thing, then I'll take the 25%. My wife was not happy with that idea. She wanted to see the money. But I needed to know if God was in this thing. And let me tell you, 15 years later, today, I am one of the owners of the very company that I was born to. Today, that very same company now is an organization that now expands beyond South Africa into Botswana, into Nigeria, into Tanzania. It's what causes me to travel so much. And when I look at it, I remember one thing. God said, give me your time. And I gave him. Give me of yourself, and I gave him. And what God has given us back as a family far exceeds anything I could have ever given to him. And I share this with you to glorify God. That God has no intention for us to remain where we are. But we've got to understand his principle, his plans, and follow them. And it is my prayer that as June and his wife starts with you down this journey of faith and finance, that God willing and I arrive this year, back in December, I want to hear some stories about what God has done with your financial lives as a result of going down the journey of faith and finance.